It feels as if the Sixers are narrowing their search for who that third superstar is to pair with Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. However, a dark horse name has entered the conversation that has been off the radar for the Sixers for a little bit of time. This is not a guy who's unfamiliar to Sixers trade conversations before, but it is a guy that I do think is interesting to view in a little different light these days. That being Zach LaVine. I want to jump into the initial reports, why it does seem like this could be an option for the Sixers, whether the risk-reward does sway in this team's favor, and everything else that has to go with Zach LaVine, both the player and the issues with the contract that surround him. So to start with this initial report, which is what sparked this saying that the Bulls' asking price for Zach LaVine has dropped significantly. Both sides have increased desires on making a trade happen this offseason. With LaVine's market barely materializing, it appears Chicago might be willing to simply perform a salary dump deal. And that is why there is some new light. Is that Zach LaVine probably is not a guy that you're willing to empty the cupboard of assets for. However, if he's on the clearance rack and the price is cheap, it may be a dance worth taking there. And particularly when talking about it from a salary dump perspective, that you do have a chance to collect something else. And my eyes are on the prize of Alex Caruso in this situation. And then if you're talking about a potential lineup of Tyrese Maxey, Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, whether it be Nico Batum or Kelly Oubre, and then Joel Embiid, that's something there. And I still, obviously, there's other players that would like to be added around the edges, but this is worth considering in my mind. Now, there's a lot to break down when it comes to Zach LaVine. And I think NBA University did a nice job of putting it here that said a healthy Zach LaVine can help a team win. Contract is scary with spotty health and inconsistent effort, but he's a perfect buy low change of scenery guy. Calculated risk for a team with a star or stars in place. Rare to acquire a complimentary star-level talent for essentially nothing. I think that's a great way to put it, and I also think it gets undersold just how good Zach LaVine is. That at his peak, when he is playing his best basketball, he's a legitimate all-star. He's among the best in the sport. Now, it is absolutely fair to assess that we have not seen that on a consistent basis, and frankly, there's been some frustrating moments. And to get the elephant out of the room, it is that contract that is the scariest thing. And to dive into exactly what that is here, that LaVine due for $43 million this year, $45.9 million next year, and then a $48.9 million player option in the 26-27 season there. Those are some scary numbers. This would be contractually the third star, the guy that is eating up that percentage of the salary cap. That would be Zach LaVine, and you have to be ready to commit to this. Now, I actually kind of like the value and kind of the length of this deal. That you can look at it as obviously try it, see if it works this year. Then there is next year where you have the chance to potentially get off it if it is a disaster. And then just the player option. The worst case scenario if things are going south, that you have Zach LaVine for 3 seasons. But I think there should be more stock in what happens if it goes right. And to dive into who Zach LaVine is as a player, I did want to start by looking at his stats for this season. That this year he averaged 19.5 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 2.1 turnovers, shot 45.2% from the field, 34.9% from 3. He did shoot 45.2% on corner threes, which is a very intriguing number there, and 52.5% of his three-pointers were assisted. Also, 44.9% of his shot diet as a whole was from beyond the three-point line. And of course, he's just 29 years old. There is a little bit more youth as it pertains to Zach LaVine for some of the Paul George, Jimmy Butler, LeBron James conversations that we're having. However, the age does not matter if the player is not a fit, and there are some concerns with Zach LaVine. For starters, the injuries are a real thing. And when you want to look at how many games that he's played throughout his history, of course, starting out strong with 77 as a rookie, 82 in his second season, and it was downhill from there. 47 games, 24 games, 63 games, 60 games, 58, 67, 77, and just 25 this season. And by the way, this season coming off an elective surgery that also has some weird constraints to it. It is kind of worded into this article here, but I do want to elaborate a little bit on it, that it's written that Chicago Bulls star Zach LaVine has had season-ending surgery on his right foot on Thursday. The team announced late last week that LaVine would have an operation after he and his agency, Clutch Sports Group, consulted with the team and outside medical personnel. The two-time All-Star is expected to miss 4 to 6 months. The decision to have surgery basically squashed any chance the Bulls had of trading him prior to Thursday's deadline and created more long-term questions for the franchise. Quote, I think we have a great relationship with Zach, a great relationship with his representation in Rich Paul, Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations Arturas Karnizovas said. Quote, I think we always work together, and I think his thoughts are always about the team. He's trying to win, and he's trying to win when he's healthy. So a lot to break down there. The most important note to me, this was elective surgery. This was something that, of course, LaVine needed, that it was an issue he needed to get fixed, but the timing of it is questionable. And this was at the point in time in which the rumors were truly swirling about will Zach LaVine get traded, and he elected to close that door himself. And perhaps what's even more noteworthy in this conversation is the Bulls were at the better because Zach LaVine was not on the floor. That we saw the emergence of Kobe White look like a true up-and-coming star in the NBA, which was a huge surprise as he had kind of hit the decline since coming into the NBA. That he was an intriguing guy coming out of college, showed some flashes through the first couple years, and did not seem to be trending in the right direction. He corrected that this season by showing what he's capable of doing, and only got that opportunity because LaVine was shut down. But that also brings up the questions of if Kobe White can be as effective as he was in that a similar role, why was not Zach LaVine? Now, again, I do think fit is relevant here. I do think the desire to play, and the Bulls are far from an organization that I would consider the model for how you want to run a team. Again, they have not traded a player since 2021, which is straight up organizational malpractice considering how locked in basketball purgatory they are. But the thing that appeals to me the most about Zach LaVine, number one, the cost has to be factored in here, that we're not talking about emptying the clip, that this could keep the Sixers set up for some further moves down the line. This is something that you're not trading the 5 first-round picks to go bring in Jimmy Butler or bring in LeBron James or whatever that is the case. You're likely only just taking on the salary and giving up a little bit to make it work. That it likely would be some sort of sign and trade the Sixers would need to do, a player that could interest the Bulls in free agency, maybe a Malik Monk situation or something like that could be a player that is interesting them, or maybe just help them get DeRozan back. Something along those lines I think could work because the motivation in Chicago's mind is to get off that contract for Zach LaVine. And as I mentioned, I do think Zach LaVine is just straight up better than his reputation would indicate. That when you're looking at some of these stats, we're talking about a guy that has been a real deal all-star. Flashback to that 2020-21 season, which was not that long ago. Him averaging 27.4 points per game, 4.9 assists, 5.0 rebounds. And the biggest thing that is appealing to me about Zach LaVine's game as a whole is his three-point shooting. That in his career, he's a 38.2% three-point shooter on 5.8 long-range attempts per game. That is real deal efficiency on high volume. And flashing back to that same 2021 season, that he shot in that season 41.9% from beyond the three-point arc on 8.2 three-point attempts per game. That is something that is more or less a lock in my mind, and something that has turned me away from some of the Jimmy Butler conversations. That I do believe the way to optimize Joel Embiid as a basketball player, you have to have shooters around him. Another reason why Brandon Ingram doesn't interest me quite to the highest extent is I want guys that are just going to let it fly. I want high-volume three-point shooters, and that is what is in Paul George's favor, and then, of course, Zach LaVine at a much more discounted price. I also view LaVine a little more positively in the way that it's tough to get yourself going on a night-to-night basis when you're playing for a team that isn't going anywhere. But I think Zach LaVine, more so than anything, would like to play for a contender. He's kind of just sat in this middle ground of the NBA for really his entire career, and I think he is a guy that would be optimized more by playing on a winning team. I think he would be more willing to take his role, and by the way, it is worth noting here that there is a relationship between Zach LaVine and both Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. For Tyrese Maxey specifically, that both LaVine and Maxey are New Balance athletes, both represented and sponsored by them. They've shot commercials together for that. They're also both guys under the Clutch Sports umbrella, which of course there will be the negotiations with Tyrese Maxey's contract. Why not get in the room and talk to Rich Paul about the chances of Zach LaVine joining forces as well? There is the relationship there. Then on the Joel Embiid side of things, that Zach LaVine is also a Drew Hanlen guy. Of course, Hanlen being Joel Embiid's primary trainer, the guy that he credits a ton for the levels that his game has taken. And there is kind of a specific way that Hanlen trains with the game skills. Shout out to the Pure Sweat family. I'm a fan of the way that Hanlen runs the whole operation over there, and I think his clientele speaks for itself. But there are opportunities in which LaVine and Embiid have trained together over the years. This is a guy that is a high-level scorer. That, yes, there are flaws. No, he's not a great defender. No, there are questions about the injury history. But if he is on the bargain bin, if the Bulls are ready to just give him away, the Sixers should absolutely be working those phones. And I understand that the real risk here is what you're passing up, that you're closing the door on the opportunity for having this cap space, for being able to sign these max guys, that essentially LaVine would be the decision due to the salary cap implications. But if you're going down swinging, if you're not getting the ideal target, if Paul George is heading back to Los Angeles, if LeBron has no interest in leaving the Lakers, if Jimmy Butler is not ready to force himself out, or Miami's not ready to give up on that, the Sixers have to take a swing somewhere, and I think there's worse options than going for LaVine. That I do believe this is a higher outlook or a higher potential than going the role player route. That Zach LaVine People forget very quickly how good this guy was at a point in time, and I do believe he can refine that in the right situation, and that situation could very well be Philadelphia. So let me know if you're thinking the same way that I am. Again, I am hesitant dependent on the price, but if the Bulls are as motivated to get rid of Zach LaVine and get that contract off the books as it seems, I do think these Sixers could be a place to support that. So once again, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video here. Drop a like and subscribe to the channel to keep the Digest family growing. I'll be talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest.